And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are 10 commanders that I'm going to be talking about that used to be absolutely terrifying back in the day. I like to make videos like this once in a while to, it's a little bit of a nostalgia thing. I come across, especially commanders once in a while, we're like, oh man, I haven't seen that commander in forever. Used to be all over the place when I first started playing, and now I never see it. And these 10 in particular were ones that I just remember. Me, yes, but for the most part, the reaction that people would give when they found out you had that in the command zone were like, uh-oh, watch out for that guy, right? This guy's terrifying. And in some of the cases, people had the feeling like this wasn't even a casual commander in some of these cases, right? And I like to do these videos because, man, things have changed, right? That's the big part about it. Yes, it is a nostalgia thing, but also it is, wow, have things changed a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. Let's start it with Sram, Senior Edificer, right? This is a commander. I remember very well. I had just started playing the commander format when this guy came out, and he very quickly became a super powerful commander. He very quickly became the most popular mono white commander. Very quickly became the most popular mono white commander. I saw him all the time, and he almost was I don't want to say he was a CEDH commander, but I think he definitely was in that sphere. 1 and a white Dwarf Advisor 2/2. Whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. That's it. But the draw a card worked really well, of course, with the equipment part, which a lot of them, not even a lot, honestly, but there was quite a few equipment that cost 0, right? And that's what you would do. It was like a mono white storm deck almost. And around that exact same time, of course, Aetherflux Reservoir came out, and that was sort of the win con for those decks. Is I just cast a lot of 0 mana equipment, like as cheap as I can get, draw a bunch of cards, and of course, essentially storm off and gain a bunch of life with my Aetherflux Reservoir. I mean, wasn't even a life gain deck. It was just, I'm getting the life gain off of my Aetherflux Reservoir and shooting people with that. It's funny to think, does anyone do that anymore? This still does have 1,700 decks or so on EDH Rec. It has certainly fallen off considerably just in mono white commanders alone. I mean, it's like the 15th most popular mono white commander. I'm not sure if people are still playing those decks. You can make a really decently. I mean, you have a commander that triggers to draw you a card. Funny enough, that was a rare thing back then, right? When this guy came out, you didn't see that much, where whenever you do this thing, you get to draw a card. Of course, we see that 7 or 8 commanders like that in every set now. This guy was one of the first. We didn't see that much back then, and he was really scary to play against. Seton, Krosan Protector, is a commander that I'm sure a lot of people have never even seen before, but this was indeed a commander that was kind of scary to play against back in the day. Green, green, green. Centaur Druid 2/2. Tap an untapped Druid you control. Add a green to your mana pool. And that was the deck. The deck was obviously Mana Dork Tribal, whatever you want to call it. And it was with that big green deck. It was that I'm going to go off sort of deck. A little bit like the Elf Ball deck does, right? It was sort of had that Elf Ball deck kind of feel, except with druids, because of course you could just tap all your druids to create a bunch of mana and cast, Genesis Wave, stuff like that. Again, another card I never see anymore that I used to see in every single commander game. This deck was scary. It was just I ramp super quick. It was that archetypal mono green deck that just does big splashy things, and I cast a giant Genesis Wave, and then I create a Hoof Behemoth and everyone's dead, right? And that kind of stuff. Things got out of hand very, very quickly because, of course, your commander enabled you to ramp really, really quickly. And it was a deck that people kind of feared when they saw it in the command zone. And of course, most people probably never even seen this commander before. It is rank 900 on EDH Rec, currently under 1,000 decks. I haven't seen it in ages. Would I be terrified if I saw one? Probably not. Another one that is in the sort of category of, storming off, just going off like crazy. Maybe still to this day it is. Wort, the raidmother, 4 and 2 Gruul hybrid mana, Goblin Shaman 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 green and red Goblin warrior creature tokens. Each red or green instant or sorcery spell you cast has Conspire. And of course, that was the part you were building around. I mean, this is a 6 mana commander. And of course, Gruul are not the best colors. This is a weird commander, funny enough, because you're doing the Spell Slinger theme in Gruul colors. How often do you see that? So that made it a little less intimidating, but still, this was a deck where you would just go off, right? Out of nowhere, just like the Seton deck, just like maybe the Sram deck, you would go off very, very easily with this deck. people were terrified of this commander because of the conspire ability. You just had a whole bunch of tokens in play, or red and green creatures of any kind, I guess, and you start tapping down, copying all your spells. Of course, now we have commanders that are in is it colors, which is probably better than this, that are very easily copying spells way easier than this does. That probably costs less mana than this does, way less mana, in fact. So yeah, by comparison, I mean, this is still a really good commander, but by comparison, you know, if you're just looking for power level or scary, obviously there's ones that are way scarier than this. This might be one where if I was playing against a guy who had a Wort deck, I would be like, man, I know what that deck is capable of. And I think I would still be pretty terrified of it. Omnath, Locus of Mana, the OG. Omnath, of course, the mono green one, 2 and a green elemental 1/1. You don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end. And Omnath, Locus of Mana gets +1/+1 for each unspent green mana you have. So, of course, this was another one of those kind of big green decks. This is still a pretty popular commander. Almost 5,200 decks on EDHREC still. Wow. So people still are playing it. You know, I mean, obviously the Voltron strategy all around, and I will get to a few more of those, is not nearly as scary as it used to be. So that in general, like the next few I'm going to talk about, just because the Voltron strategy isn't used as much and isn't as scary and all of that, those commanders are less scary for that reason. Also, the big green mean decks are also less scary. I mean, just ramping alone is way easier in most other colors. That used to be obviously green is still really good at it and way better than every other color, but all the other colors are better at it than they certainly used to be, right? It was more of an advantage. It used to be green ramp and then everyone else is way down here. Now there's a little bit less disparity. So for green, that was the big advantage. And funny enough, back when this commander was really popular, even card draw wasn't that great in green. So the real big advantage for green that it had over everything else was I can just ramp like crazy. And of course, your commander wants you to do that because you can just fill your mana pool and have your commander be huge. So it was really easy for you to grow your commander into a big scary creature and then Rogue's Passage and just start one-shotting people, right? Is it still a scary commander? I don't think so. I think removal is just too good, right? Is just too easy. I mean, the last time I played against this commander, dude's got like 20 mana in his mana pool, and of course, all I have to do is get your commander off the battlefield, and then that mana just vanishes, right? So there is that as well. I think mostly this is a case of removal is just really good. Also, I will point out that monocolor decks were way more popular. Now you don't see them much at all. Of course, there's just way more to choose from, so it's way easier to play a multicolored commander and just have options to more colors. And if you have options to more colors, that obviously means you're going to have options for removal, particularly creature removal, right? If you have white in your deck, you know, you're splashing white, you can just splash white for the creature removal and nothing else, and you'll be laughing there, right? So if you're in a mono green deck or maybe even a mono red deck, it could be really hard to get this Omnath off the table once he got really big. Now, not a lot of people are playing mono green and mono red decks, so it gets a lot easier to deal with them. Same can be said for any of these Voltron commanders, like Shuyun the Silent Tempest. Again, another commander that, man, maybe some commander players out there have never seen this before. This guy used to be a terror. It used to be one of the best, I think, Voltron commanders out there. 2 and a blue, human monk, 3/2, has prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may pay the 2 hybrid Boros mana. If you do, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. And of course, that double strike was used on your commander. You could use it somewhere else, but you just use it on your commander here, obviously. And of course, the prowess as well is going to bump up your commander. So this was kind of a spellslinger theme. This was unique in that it was the Voltron strategy, but rather the typical Voltron strategy of, like, you have the Ural deck where I'm obviously putting auras on my commander, or you have the commanders where I'm putting lots of equipment on them, or maybe the commanders where you're doing both. Here, you're doing it in the instant and sorcery theme because, of course, your commander has prowess. So if you cast 3 or 4 instants or sorceries, and of course, you're going to be doing the ones that are going to be giving your commander evasion, your commander can get up to, like, say, 5, 6, 7 power, and you're giving it double strike. So you could get it, you know, it wasn't that hard to do a one-shot here. I know people look at this and they go, that was scary. I saw people get one-shotted with this guy more than enough times, for sure. So definitely, and obviously because you're in Jeskai colors, you can play a very control-y theme. It's easy to protect your commander. This guy was really, really scary. Even more so, Rafiq of the Many. And, you know, second verse, same as the first. This is basically sort of the exact same commander, but in Bant colors instead of Jeskai, because because of course, whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains double strike until end of turn. But you're going to use that on your commander, right? That's every Rafiq of the Many deck I've ever seen. Again, I talked about it on my 5 builds video. It would be neat to build a Rafiq deck where you're giving other creatures double strike. That can be a really neat way to go with this. I saw Rafiq of the Many all the time. Again, it was one of the most popular, maybe even the most popular Voltron commander deck out there for a while. And every deck was the exact same. Obviously, you're doing the exalted stuff, which Bant Colors is the best at. Again, you could do equipment here, auras, you could do any of those, right? And then you're just giving your commander double strike and getting in for tons of damage. That was the way this commander was built, and it was scary. People trembled when they saw Rafiq of the Many in the command zone. Still a reasonably popular commander, 3,500 decks. Definitely still getting played. I wonder if people are still doing the Voltron strategy here. Again, the Voltron strategy all around doesn't work nearly as good in the commander format. I would also say it's a less fun strategy. One of the things I always didn't love about the Voltron strategy is you would have basically one player get knocked out at a time, right? That's really the only way it works with a Voltron strategy. At least that's the best way, is I just target one guy. And because you don't want to waste the commander damage you've already done. So I get one guy, knock him out, and then I move on to the next guy, and then I move on to the next guy. And, you know, a lot of times you could knock out one guy really, really early on in the game, and that's not fun for that guy, right? So, maybe it wasn't the funnest strategy ever either. And that's the way pretty much everyone built this deck. Definitely not a terrifying commander anymore, I don't think. Titania, Protector of Argoth. And yeah, this is the, third mono green commander I'm talking about here. Of course, back when I started playing Commander, mono green commanders were terrifying. Lots of them were. And again, I'm not even talking about the elf ball commanders here. A bunch of those were pretty terrifying as well. Titania, Protector of Argoth was a terrifying commander for a while. 3 green, green elemental, 5/3. When Titania, Protector of Argoth enters the battlefield, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Whenever a land you control is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, create a 5/3 green elemental creature token. That got out of hand really, really fast, right? I mean, all you have to do is sack an Evolving Wilds and you get a 5/3, and then sack something else, and then sack something else, and things get out of hand really, really fast. I've seen many games where this commander just closes things out really, really quickly. And again, removal wasn't as good back then. Even board wipes weren't that good. I remember playing a game against that Titania Protector of Argoth deck where my opponent had sacrificed pretty much all their lands. They had like 2 lands left, but they had a giant army of elementals and just started smashing everyone, and nobody could draw board wipe. That might have been the game where I was like, you know, I remember thinking back in the day, people really don't put enough removal in their decks, I don't think. And I remember talking to the one guy in the game, like, does anyone got a board wipe? Like, come on, I already cast one. So like, how many board wipes you guys have in your deck? And dude who's playing the mono red deck is like, I only got 2, Starstorm and Blasphemous Act. And that's it. I'm like, well, what if you don't draw one? Then you just lose to a deck like this. And I don't know. Do people play more board wipes now? Maybe that's why commanders like this aren't nearly as good. Back in the day, people used to put like 1 or 2 board wipes in their deck, so the chances they drew on weren't great. So a deck like this, it was very easy for someone to just sacrifice all their lands, make a giant army, and then just slowly smash everyone to death, and there's nothing they can do about it. This actually used to be a pretty terrifying commander. Definitely, I don't think so much anymore. Experiment Kraj. Hey, remember this one? Yeah, that's right. This was a terrifying commander back in the day. Definitely one, man, I haven't seen this forever. And this is the reason why I actually ended up making this video, is because my patron had sent me a deck for the deck doctor. An Experiment Kraj was the commander. And of course, what they were doing in that deck is comboing off. That's what everyone did with this commander, and that's why it was terrifying, right? 2 green, green, blue, blue, ooze mutant 4/6 if you've never seen it before, because I'm sure there's some commander players out there that haven't. It has all activated abilities of each other creature with a +1/+1 counter, and of course you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And that made it so that combo potential was very possible. Obviously, you just needed other creatures in play, and honestly, I don't even know what they were, or I can't think of any off the top of my head, but you would just have certain creatures, a combination of creatures that had abilities that comboed with other abilities on other creatures, and you would just have to put +1/+1 counters on them, and then your commander would have all those abilities. I think a lot of them were untapping. Like, it was very easy for you to infinitely tap and untap your Experiment Kraj, because you would do mana dorks and stuff like that. And then you could just infinitely put +1/+1 counters on another creature and get an infinitely big creature, stuff like that, right? So it was a I mean, it just seems like a silly commander, but it was certainly a commander because of the combo potential, right? And again, I can't even remember what any of them were off the top of my head, but there was a bunch of infinite combos, probably even more so that you can get into nowadays, but infinite combos you can get into that would just, maybe not end the game, but certainly put you close to doing so. So this was a commander that when you saw it in the command zone, you were certainly concerned and you were probably holding on to your removal. Ezuri, Claw of Progress used to be one of the most popular commanders in the entire format for a while, and certainly was a terrifying commander for a couple of reasons. I suppose there was the situation where I just have, that evasion creature that I could just pile counters on. Right? It doesn't Birds of Paradise, right? I just pile counters on my Birds of Paradise and I can just get in for tons of damage. So it was a deck that could very easily get out of hand and just start smashing people. But of course, the main reason why you would be on high alert as soon as you saw this in the command zone, again, these commanders are the ones where as soon as the game started, you see it in the command zone, you're like, oh, that one. Like, you're on high alert for the whole game. And also some of these, like even this one, I would say this is a commander where a lot of people didn't feel like it was very casual. And the reason why was because of the Sage of Hours combo, right? That is an infinite turns combo that very easily slotted into every Ezuri deck. And still, I would say there's a lot of people that are of the opinion that an infinite turns combo isn't for casual commander. So, it just became, okay, you're playing an Ezuri deck. You'd have to have that rule zero discussion almost every time you saw an Ezuri deck where it's like, okay, do you have the Sage of Hours combo in there? You do? Okay, well, it doesn't really. And, I've had rule zero discussion with guys in the Ezuri deck where they're like, okay, I just won't play it. Yes, I do have Sage of Hours in there, but if you guys don't think it's, infinite turns is casual, I just won't play it. A lot of these commanders, this one for sure, you definitely wanted to leave your removal handy. Like if I had a swords in my opening hand, I'm saving it for the Ezuri guy likely, right? Because that at the beginning of combat trigger got out of hand really, really fast. And of course, if you don't know how the Sage of Hours combo works, all you would have to get up is to the appropriate amount of experience counters, right? And once you did that, you could put the counters on it at the beginning of combat on your turn. I think you would need 5, right? Remove them, take an extra turn, and repeat the process, and you get infinite turns very easily. It was really one of the easiest ways, because of course, one of your combo pieces in the command zone, and green searches for creatures really easily. It was one of the easiest ways in the entire format to take infinite turns. So obviously, it was pretty terrifying for that reason. Lastly, I'm going to talk about Sidisi Brood Tyrant, and this is one, again, that I've talked about on my channel before, where this was, not only was this one of the most popular commanders in the entire format, like it was top 5 for the longest time. Before I started playing Commander, and for the first couple of years that I was playing Commander, this was like one of the most popular commanders in the entire format. Obviously, it was the most popular Sultai commander in the entire format for a long time. I think Muldrotha finally knocked her off the top of the mountain when that one came out. Still is really popular. This still has over 5,400 decks on EDH Rec. It is still the 175th most popular commander in the format, which is pretty darn good. This is the one, though, and I'm talking about this last for a reason. This is the one that I never found terrifying. This is one that, again, for whatever reason, people felt like this wasn't a very casual commander. I heard definitely on more than one occasion, I heard people say, oh, you're playing Sidisi, that's not very casual. I didn't get it. I'm not saying I said that. I heard it from other people on multiple occasions. I think it is. It very much is. And I don't think it's very terrifying either. I think one of the big reasons why people found this commander to be so terrifying in almost every single game that a Sidisi deck used to win, again, maybe people are doing it differently now, it was just a living death deck. That's basically what every Sidisi deck turned into. Every Sidisi deck was, I just spend the first however many turns milling, right? They would self-mill themselves. Your commander would give you zombie tokens, which is nice, but nobody's going to win the game with 2/2 zombie tokens, right? You could, but it's difficult. You would win by filling your graveyard full of all sorts of creatures, namely Eternal Witness would be one of them, and then I would Living Death, and of course the Eternal Witness would get my Living Death back so that I could do it again if somebody cast a board wipe. And once you got into that situation, it was really difficult to break up. And this is one of the commanders, not the only commander, but it's certainly one of the commanders that, that is a great scenario, but you just got to play Graveyard Hate, right? This was one of the commanders where I came to the decisions that one of the fundamental things that every commander deck needs is Graveyard Hate, hate because, yeah, if you don't have graveyard hate, what are you going to do? Like, they're just going to do that over and over and over. Or any recursion will work. Living Death, of course, being the best one, but any recursion will work. And if you can't do anything about it, they're just going to keep repeating the process. Graveyard hate is necessary. And, like some other commanders, Sidisi becomes very underwhelming, in my opinion, if you have good graveyard hate. I mean, this deck does literal nothing if you have a Rest in Peace in play, right? So that is the solution to that problem. But it was terrifying. This was, funny enough, a very terrifying commander. Obviously, by today's standards, not even close, I don't think. I mean, that's still a great play. Living Death, I get all these creatures back. That's still a good play. Probably less of a good play than it was, before Farewell existed and stuff like that. Again, we have a lot more answers to stuff like that now than they did back then. Back then, you didn't have a lot. I mean, you had pretty good board wipes, not a lot of great ones. Maybe people just didn't play enough. You also maybe didn't have, you had a lot of graveyard hate. Again, I don't think people played enough of it. Certainly, this was a terrifying commander for a lot of people back in the day, and that is not the case anymore. So there you go, 10 commanders that used to be really terrifying whenever you'd see them in the command zone across the table from you, and that is certainly, I don't think, the case anymore. They're still really good, obviously, right? Again, I'm not saying these commanders aren't good anymore. A lot of them are certainly not nearly as popular as they used to be. They're still all really good commanders. They just aren't terrifying, right? I mean, obviously, Ezuri, Sage of Hours, Infinite Turns is still obviously really good. But I don't know, maybe more instant speed interaction. We have a lot more, but I think also people are just playing a lot more. You guys let me know what you think. Are people still terrified? Do you have one of these decks? Do you have the Rafiq of the Many deck that is actually a Voltron deck? And when you bust it out, your play group still gets a little terrified and they're still worried about it. You guys let me know in the comments below if that is the case. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.